Well, thank you, Mr Betts. It's a great pleasure to speak under your chairmanship of this debate about VAR and its impact on football attendances. And it's particularly good, I think, to have you as the chair, because it's so difficult to get to speak to a Sheffield Wednesday supporter about football at the moment. And so, you know, this is an opportunity that I don't really get. But I confess it feels somewhat incongruous as the country's attention is focused on the coronavirus crisis and as football has come to a stop for Parliament to debate a non-life-threatening matter like video-assisted referees and its impact on football attendances. In fact, I've been attempting to get a debate on this subject in the fortnightly ballot for several weeks leading up to this. And so it's somewhat unfortunate timing that this debate was finally drawn out in this of all weeks. But nonetheless, the coronavirus crisis is both a medical and an economic one. And the financial health of our national game is an issue that should matter to us. Football, and specifically the Premier League, are one of the nation's key economic and cultural exports. And so anything that affects the popularity and esteem of the Premier League does indeed matter. So whilst we all accept that there are more pressing matters, there will be a day when coronavirus is in the past and we'll turn again to the normality that makes life rich, varied and enjoyable. And so I hope that those watching at home will accept that this debate is being hosted in that spirit and that taking an hour or less to discuss the impact that VAR has had on football will not in any way diminish the government's preparedness to tackle the coronavirus crisis or the steps needed to support businesses or people through it. So, Mr Betts, to VAR, there seems to be almost universal agreement that the way that VAR is currently being used in the English Premier League is bad for football, but less uniformity of opinion about whether it is a good idea done badly or just a bad idea. During this speech, I intend to make the case for the abolition of VAR, whilst also looking at some of the steps that could be taken to improve it if the EPL, the club and the game more widely are insistent that it is here to stay and can only be reformed and not abolished. To explain why I believe VAR should be abolished completely, I need to start by explaining what I see as football's enduring appeal. There is a reason why football is the most successful, richest, most widely watched and most widely played sport in the history of our planet. Football's appeal is both its simplicity and its accessibility. Wherever you are in the world, if you've got something round and you've got two rocks for goalposts, you've got a game. Until very recently, at whatever level you played, at its core, football's rules were the same. From the local park, where there's more people playing than watching, to Celtic Park in front of 60,000, football was football. Alongside that simplicity, football's USP is the rarity of the goal. A goal can be a thing of beauty, a thrilling movement that builds to a crescendo with a thrilling release. Or it can be workmanlike. It can be brutal, the ball forced over the line. It can be fortunate, freakish, or amazingly simple, sometimes even comical and farcical. It can be controversial, a moment to delight and bring a nation together in a shared explosion of joy. Or it can be tragic, as an entire ground, indeed a nation, clasps their head in their hands in perfect union. There is no other moment in any other sport so special as the moment in football in which a goal is scored. But however the goal is scored, it is rare and it is important. And because of its rarity and its importance, it matters and it is celebrated. And it is this, the very fundamental ethos of what it means to love football, that is the moment that VAR chooses to interfere with. That moment of simple joy or simple despair that is robbed by a faceless man sat on an industrial estate in southwest London, sat miles away from those who really care, as all they can do is wait for his dreadful and often imperfect verdict. The wild, breathless celebrations halted by that dreadful purple appearance on a big screen of the words goal checking. The celebrations, sometimes celebrations that have already been underway for 30 seconds or more, placed on pause as two sets of fans stop and stare at a screen that offers them nothing but the fact that uncertainty now reigns. That uncertainty in a sport that thrives on being played without delay. That uncertainty can last for 3 minutes or more. The chant about VAR so commonplace that there isn't a single Premiership fan who couldn't instantly sing it for you. Now, if what VAR offered you was flawless decision-making, I'd still say it wasn't worth it, but it doesn't even do that. When VAR was introduced, we were promised that it was there to overturn clear and obvious errors, but it's become a farce. For a toenail offside, 30 seconds before a goal was scored, and after a 3-minute delay, Sheffield United's goal at Tottenham was ruled offside. Arsenal scored a goal at Old Trafford that was uncontested by the Manchester United defenders because the linesman's flag had gone up several seconds before the goal was scored. West Ham fans celebrated their last-minute equaliser at Bramall Lane for fully 45 seconds before there was even a suggestion that it might be called into question. Now, I must confess, Mr. Betts, on that final occasion I just referred to, that last-minute disallowed goal did bring me a momentary pleasure. But even as we celebrated this goal being disallowed, there was a part of me mourning what we had all lost. So I've explained why I don't want VAR in football. But even if it must be tolerated, there is so much that is wrong with how it's being delivered. Firstly, the technology is applied to offside decisions on the basis of where one player's most prominent limb is in relation to another player's at a specific moment that the film is frozen. But a millisecond either side of that, and the player might have been onside, and the technology is imperfect in terms of the exact moment that a ball was kicked. So they're overruling goals on hairline decisions with a technology that isn't good enough to deliver the level of precision they are pretending to offer. They're using a camera that is not in line with the offside line to overrule a decision by a linesman who was, and accepting those arbitrary lines drawn on a screen are providing an accurate description of a millimetre of who was furthest forward. I can guarantee you, Mr. Betts, that if VAR, this dreadful stain on the beautiful game, continues long into the future, they will look back in 20 years and they will laugh at the technology that we currently rely on to suggest that we understand whether or not someone was offside. What VAR has done is expose the gap between our expectations of players' performance and that of referees. When a striker skies a shot over the bar or a goalkeeper lets a ball slip from his grasp, fans of his side are willing to view that error in context with the overall performance. But no such allowance is ever given to the referee. And it's this thirst for perfection in decision-making, which is a product of the pundit era and the enormous investment in technology by Sky Sports and others, designed to improve our enjoyment of the game, that's now driven us to this soulless VAR experiment. The coverage of every match for years and of every post-match managerial interview has included a section on the decisions the referees have made or the manager's view of whether the referee was any good. Turns out that those managers who've lost usually found the referee wasn't very good, and we all got used to that as part of the sort of background music that there was to every match. And now that focus has shifted from the decision of whether the referee was right to whether VAR was right. And so the football headlines every week, not about the performances of the players, but about the decisions made and about the technology. In attempting to justify the success of VAR, the English Premier League's briefing note to me in advance of this debate informed me that a decision was only overturned in 1 out of every 3 matches, as though that should show me how little it was intervening. Far from it. If it's only correcting so few decisions, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Because it's ruined a lot more goal celebrations for me than that, and not just the ones that get overturned. Even in the celebrations that ultimately aren't in vain, they're not the same because fans are wondering, was that something that's subsequently going to be called into question? And so that spontaneity that is so crucial, so endemic to football, is what is lost as a result of VAR. But it's also changing the way that football is refereed, played and watched. VAR is changing the decision-making to the detriment of the fairness of the sporting contest. Linesmen are instructed not to flag for offside unless they're absolutely sure, even if they actually believe it is offside. So a linesman who in an EFL Championship match would flag for offside because he thinks it is, will in the Premier League allow the game to carry on because it was close, giving an unfair advantage to the attacking side. This can lead to a load of football that's a waste of time because ultimately a goal is scored that's disallowed. Or it can lead to an offside player winning a corner or a free kick that then leads to a goal which should never have happened because the linesman thinks he was probably offside anyway, but didn't give it because he was correctly following the edict not to flag for a marginal offside. So when I think about the difference between the fan experience in the Premier League and the Championship League, I almost envy you, Mr. Betts, I have to say. I maybe wouldn't go that far, but if VAR is to exist, there are changes needed, both to the rules of the game and the operation of VAR, if it's going to be anything other than a huge drag on the appeal of a hugely successful product. Most crucially, the offside law needs reviewing. New referees and linesmen were always taught that if you're level, you're onside, as the rules state. In real time, that made sense. But in the VAR era, there's no such thing as level. It now means that if at the moment the screen is frozen, one player's toe is a millimetre beyond another player's shoulder, the goal is disallowed. This is not what the offside rule was designed to outlaw. And it needs rewriting because it's spoiling the simplicity of the sport that's so important. And we need to return to the original principle that if the majority of two players' bodies are basically level, then the striker is considered to be onside. Secondly, fans must be involved in the process as other sports have managed, with the pictures that are being viewed by the referee also available for the fans in the stadium to see. Thirdly, the referee is the referee, and he should view the original pictures. And if he is certain that he's made a clear and obvious error, only at that moment should the decision be altered. And finally, a clear and obvious error means precisely that. If it takes someone 3 minutes to work out whether it was an error, it wasn't a clear and obvious one. In cricket, they have umpire's call, which means a degree of latitude is given that says that when we stay with the original decision to allow for the uncertainty that exists in the technology and the decision that is being made. And that should be adopted in football so that fewer hairline decisions are overturned and fans can once again celebrate a goal, knowing that unless there is a clear and obvious error, there will be no change to the decision. I've been pleased to bring this important matter to Parliament, Mr. Betts, and you'll be aware that the debate referred to the effect that VAR had on football attendances. The purpose of that title was partly because the Table Office considered football attendances to be a matter that this House was allowed an opinion on, whilst the rules of football were not. But also because the evidence is that VAR is reducing the enjoyment of football fans. A YouGov poll showed that 67% of fans who watch football felt that VAR had made watching football a less enjoyable experience. Can anyone imagine any other industry introducing at great expense an innovation that its paying customers said made its product worse? And yet instead of scrapping it, they reacted by doubling down on it and claiming that it was progress that we all had to get to enjoy. So I don't like the principle of it. I hate the implementation of it. I think it professes a precision that it doesn't deliver. It makes the game our children watch a different sport to the one they play. It changes the way that football's rules are refereed, and it makes obsolete or unworkable rules that made sense with on-field referees in the pre-VAR era. Mr. Betts, the beautiful game is diminished by VAR, and I say scrap it.